Good evening, councillors. Good evening. I hope you're all well. Good evening, welcome to this Wilkie Town Council Leisure Services Committee meeting, and on Tuesday the 30th of August. I welcome you all, and just to remind you, of course, that we are now recorded and that the meetings are streamed live through the council's YouTube channel. So I ask you to bear that in mind when you're speaking. By virtue of obviously attending here today, you are consenting to have your image and audio recorded for this purpose. So under data privacy, I'll remind you about that. If you do not wish for your image and audio to be recorded, then please do not stay for the meeting. So there's one or the other. Please bear in mind that. For those that are in attendance, we're not expecting a fire drill. So if you hear the alarm, it is genuine. It's not me getting fed up, wanting to go home. And obviously go to the nearest fire exit and congregate at the assembly point by the open centre at the front of Woodford Park. So I want you to observe that. Before I get started, I'll get started. I'll take number one on the agenda, which is apologies. Obviously David Bragg, who obviously can't be here this evening. Is there anybody else that we need to make a note of?
Councillor Alison Jari has stated that she will try to attend the meeting virtually tonight. We'll make a note. She isn't online yet, is she, Kevin? No. So if she comes online, we'll make a note that she's online, and obviously that's in line with our virtual meeting protocols.
Okay. Point of clarification: are members online allowed to vote?
No. Okay, so is that all the apologies we've got? Excellent. Can I therefore go for declarations of interest, which is like 200? Does anyone have any interest that would like to declare when we get started on the agenda? Excellent. Okay, therefore I'll take item 3 on the agenda, which is the minutes of the meeting held on the 31st of May 2022, and to approve those, not to approve those minutes, but to note them as they have already been provided. Reason, don't we?
Yeah.
To approve those minutes that have already been circulated at the last full council meeting on the 21st of June. Does anybody have any comments that they would like to make? No? Okay. Then councillors, I'd like to put that to a vote, please. All those in favour, please raise their hands. All those against? All those wish to abstain? Those minutes have been carried. Thank you very much. And I just wanted to point out actually that I'm here because obviously David Bragg isn't here this evening. I'm going to say that at the start, so excuse me for my I'll then take item 4 on the agenda, which is budgetary control. And to note the report LS 1422, which starts on page 3. Kevin, is there anything you'd like to bring to our attention?
Just to note, in the usual way, if we take expenditure first, the key point there is that the overall budget percentage on expenditure is below 33%, where we might target it during the year. Likewise, on income is also the right way around. That's above, and that's largely due to the Park Leisure Centre income. There are some other items on there, such as the Bowling Green licence fee, which is paid at the start of the year, which obviously shows that as being higher. And also to note, particularly Coronation Hall income, which is a lot higher than budgeted for. And just to note that that's bounced back significantly well from the pandemic. I think there were a lot of backed up birthday parties and celebrations and things, which has meant it's very busy at the moment. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you very much. Absolutely.
Sorry, there was something else. Yes, it's probably what Alex was about to mention. There is a line which is no longer in there for the memorial ground. That is due to the change in accounting processes that we had on the basis of the information from, recommendation from our auditor about the income expenditure for the memorial ground being separated out completely from the council's income and expenditure, which is why it doesn't show in this one. It did show in the last meeting one with a 0 on both, but that's now accounted for entirely separately and reported to council by way of a separate annual return each year, for specifically for the memorial ground charity. But that line used to be in here and now it's.
Any other questions? Councillor Heath.
On expenditure, I mean, given the inflation increases we've had recently, and unfortunately we're probably going to carry on having, is there any thought to actually examining the current budget and producing a revised estimate based on, well, whatever it's going to be? Good luck with that, but are we going to be looking at, because obviously you want to think about that earlier rather than when
you're absolutely right. We have started looking at some of those things to get more of a feel for it as we go through to providing those revised estimates to council. You're absolutely right. Some of the things we know of purchases that we've bought fairly recently have gone up significantly, so there's definitely going to be some impacts there. So yeah, we are starting to look at that.
Well, ask on income. I mean, Woodford Park is looking good, but I'm comparing, obviously the last normal year was 2019. Obviously, can't really look at the others. In 2019, by this time, we're on 43% of the budget for Woodford Park. There was 163,000. Currently, we're on 126. Is it that we got some income, a lot of income coming in August, or are we actually a bit behind on our expectations?
Part of that is because of the closure. So the electrical works have obviously helped with a lot of our income. So there's a month that we would have previously invoiced for that we haven't been able to. So we are expecting a little dent in that. That of course will return in September, but I can talk a bit more about that in my report.
Right, so it's kind of timing issue. It's nothing much to worry.
Well, there obviously has been lost income.
Yeah, we won't get back because of that. Yeah.
Yeah, so there will be a little dent compared to what we were expecting when we budgeted, back in November, December time. But I don't think it's been as significant as it could have been actually. So,
thank you.
Any other questions? And I'll go on to item 5, which was the Woodford Park Leisure Centre Sports and Development Activities Report.
This one's for Ed.
Please go on to enlighten us.
good evening, everybody. So kind of like I touched on there, really, as you can see, a lot of my report relates to the electrical works that have been happening. That's pretty much taken up almost 100% of my time, if I'm honest. In the last committee meeting, members were quite keen to stress that it was really important to be quite clear to the public what was happening and in the best possible way, kind of get notification of the works out there. To do that, we had a meeting with the contractors, sat down with them and tried our best to kind of come up with a rough timetable for the works. But for a project this large, that was quite difficult to nail down dates because obviously lots of things can go wrong. So what we did, for all of our major facilities, we basically created a document that highlighted when things would be closed, how services would be disrupted, things like that. That seemed to go down quite well. We published that on our social media pages and on the website, obviously around the building and things like that. It made it onto various news channels and was seen by thousands of people. But of course, we weren't able to catch everybody, but generally speaking, that went quite well. We also, for the first 2 weeks where we suffered major disruption, pretty much without power all the way through that period, we positioned staff on the front doors of the leisure centre. So people who weren't aware of the works were able to be greeted by a member of staff and then kind of informed of what was going on and how things were being impacted. So that seemed to go quite well. That leads me nicely onto the works, actually. So they started as planned on the 1st of August. And as I mentioned there, for the first week in particular, we pretty much had no power at all. We had one extension lead being led into the building. We were able to have the freezer plugged into so we could sell ice creams at the front door. We had no phones, no computers, and pretty much nothing else actually. So it was a bit strange. It was kind of very similar to COVID actually, in that it was quite eerie in the building. But generally speaking, people have been quite understanding, and we were able to kind of offer toilet facilities, and the paddling pool kind of ran all the way through, which was quite nice. So we were able to have some kind of normality. Really, from the 15th of August, things kind of came back to normal. We were able to get the gym back up and running again with all the usual features. We opened up for hire things like table tennis and stuff like that. The only thing that really remained closed past that point was the sports hall, which we knew was going to be the majority of August anyway. So as of Monday this week, so Bank Holiday Monday, the sports hall is back open again. It's slightly reduced capacity whilst we still do some work, but ultimately we have been able to have people back playing badminton. So the first kind of regular clubs came back just over the last 2 days actually. And it's a lot brighter in there. It looks quite nice. But yeah, there's a little bit more to do before we kind of, shout to the public that we're ready basically. As I mentioned there, just in that little sentence at the end of my second point, there is going to be a day in the future, a kind of unexpected day, that's when unexpected, unplanned day, I guess is the way to put it, where all of a sudden the electricians are going to feel like it's time to start testing everything. They're going to give us a few days notice, and then we will have to go for a full closure just for one single day whilst they test pretty much everything in the building. Originally, it was a 9-week project, and this is the middle of week 5, so almost halfway through. But I believe they're working potentially a little bit ahead of schedule as well. So that day, a full day of closure could come at some point in the middle of September. But I will note that in my next report when it happens. With the electrical works, I thought what might be best as well when I finish my report is if anyone wants to ask any questions about them specifically, because it's quite an extensive project. There's so many little things that kind of have happened over the last 4 weeks that it might just be easier if anyone has anything specific they want to ask about, and I'm happy to inform as I can. The paddling pool remained open all the way through that period, which I remember that, again, in the previous meeting, that was something that was important to members. That did take a little bit of work, and the electricians weren't quite prepared for that just because of how old the system is. But we did get it going. It was only off for a couple of hours, and even then we were able to keep it open during that period. We did have a bit of a strange situation where the pool was linked into the freezer, so one went off, so did the other one. But at that point, we were kind of just getting by. Yeah, it was actually quite good, I suppose. And throughout the heat waves, we had 2 during that period. There was a decision made just to open the pool at the slightly earlier time of 9:30, just so that families could get in and use the pool before it basically got too hot in the middle of the day. And that seemed to go down really well. And we kind of made the decision that if we ever get a weather warning in relation to heat again, we'll try our best to do the same thing. There's work that goes into that in terms of staff starting earlier and coming in earlier to just get things ready. But it was received. And of course, it's been heavily used throughout the summer as expected. And I make a little note in there that because we were at the front doors, we were able to have conversations with people in a bit more detail than normal. And we had people from Brighton and Oxford, and there were families kind of meeting in the middle and would so yeah, really interesting to see how far people come just for the pool, actually. And at the bottom there, a little bit of a negative note, really, but something that we're quite used to now. We've had a little bit of trouble throughout the school holidays. We've had to call the police on one occasion where a group gained access into the sports hall. It was dealt with relatively rapidly because the officers arrived quite rapidly. Nothing followed up from that, but basically we've had to deal with little things like that throughout the summer. The most concerning really was the one we dealt with a group that were drinking quite heavily in the park. And it was on one of the days where the weather warning was in place, and they didn't have any water on them and things like that. There was genuine concern for their welfare because they were quite clearly dehydrated and not in a good way. But luckily, nothing kind of came of it again, but said potentially something to note. And like I said, if anyone wants to ask any questions about the electrical works, feel free.
Councillor John.
Yes, there's been some comments about the new lighting outside the sports hall being an appropriate target for vandals. I'm sure you thought about that, but I just wondered how Bangkok with those lights are, if there is such a thing.
There's due to be covers going across them, basically, that should kind of shield them from footballs and other things.
I thought you'd thought that one through. Next to us. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Can I ask, when will the paddling pool close for the year?
We can keep it going as long as we want to, so we never really decide until the weather turns, if I'm honest. When children go back to school, of course, it becomes very quiet, especially
Just the under
children.
fives, yeah.
Historically, we close it mid-September, or we at least keep it going until mid-September and open it in case anyone wants to. And then when it gets really cold, more importantly, the water gets really cold, we tend to shut it down. So I would anticipate mid-September, and we usually close it at the end of a Sunday, so it's kind of the last weekend of the month.
Can I ask another question?
Alison, you may ask another question.
The offer you make to just sort of turn up and pay and play on the 3G pitch, that members decided we want to enable it to be up to under 18s rather than 16s. And I know you had some doubts about that. I just want to know how that's gone.
Really, most of our trouble comes from people that haven't booked on. Not people that have booked on. People that book on tend to be quite good and quite nice. And every summer is different. So some summers we have no trouble at all. Other summers we have loads of trouble. This summer, to be honest, has been a bit hit and miss. I actually think the heat has stopped people coming out at times, but it has given us other trouble like people apart. I would say there's no overwhelming problem with it being under 18 at the moment, based on what I'm experiencing.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, please.
Can I just put on record thanks to Ed, because it's something I mentioned before about having the pool open while this work was going on. And it's turned out that we had a ridiculous.
Perfect. I was going to say.
So thanks to Ed for making sure that little baby has been kept running through the summer. So thanks very much.
Okay, does anybody else have any more questions?
Yeah, I just wondering how we're doing on gym membership. I mean, how does it compare with
So
pre-COVID?
we're still down pre-COVID,
Right.
definitely. Our highest point was the day before we went into lockdown. Yeah, since that point, but there is steady signs of recovery. And it will take time, but it took time originally to actually get to that number. So that was one of the most disappointing things about COVID from everyone up there's point of view, really, is that we'd worked hard to get to a number, and we were actually considering putting a cap on membership at one point because it was so busy. And then COVID came along, and yeah, that's where we are now. But there is a steady increase, and still hopeful.
Do you think also there's an impact of Bullmarsh centre gym opening?
The strange thing was we budgeted for an impact of Bullmarsh, and then COVID came in, so we almost accidentally budgeted for COVID. So it's been really hard to judge the impact of Bullmarsh. There have been some people that have openly said, "Oh, we're leaving because we want to be a swimming pool," and it's not really something we can compete with particularly. But often, if people leave, they don't quote why, and if people join, they don't quote why. So it can be a bit difficult to tell. But our budget from when we budgeted for Bullmarsh, COVID hit us less hard than we thought Bullmarsh would, if that makes sense. So but it's been really hard to judge the impact because of COVID.
Could you do a simple, survey monkey or something to members, new members, perhaps after 3 months, how's it going? What do you like? What don't you like? And why did you join?
When people join, start tend to ask them in person. A lot of people give us very vague answers, to be honest. It's usually how people get fit or want to lose weight. They tend to go for their personal reasons for joining, not why they've left the locations. Definitely something good.
Okay, shall we move on to the next agenda item then? Item 6, which is the report on parks and buildings from page 6.
Thank you, Chair. So the first item there is to do with the electrical work. I think we've covered that. One of the things just to mention, it did give us an opportunity to try something which is kind of flagged up in our business continuity plan as well. We moved the virtual reception of Woodford Park Leisure Centre to this building using the internet phone system we've now got, so we were able to kind of do some of those things, which is just a useful useful exercise really in showing how we might deal with issues in future should they come up. Other works that were carried out extended the opportunity, obviously, while there was a closure, to do some other work. So the maintenance team got in there, replaced all the tiles, many of which were sort of historically damaged or water damage. So that's all been done throughout the building. 3 fire doors replaced on the sports hall and the fire exit coming out the other side towards the paddling pool, and decoration of the Octalis offices and some work in there. So we managed to get all that done while it was closed. Just to note, the water heater that was mentioned previously has been installed, or replaced rather, with 2 combination boilers, which are now in working. Woodford Park, the new play area, extremely busy, really popular, and terrific to see the amount of use on there. We've got some issues which which we are working through. Some are expected to do with huge increases in litter, and we've got a lot more visitors coming to the park. I can't quantify that in numbers, but we can certainly see it in terms of what the guys are collecting from the bins and around the parks. We've got a lot of people come to the park, which is, of course, the intention, and is all good news. There's a couple of minor maintenance things that have come up, which we're addressing with the installer. We are in the defects period now, so we're picking up a few of those as we go. Memorial plaque, many of you will have attended the unveiling of a plaque for Councillor David Stairs in the herb garden, sensory garden area of the play area there on the 4th of August. Garden of Remembrance, works are scheduled to replace the timber planters. Those of you who are familiar with it, we've got timber sleeper planters which have started to deteriorate and are coming apart. They've been there since it was opened, so they've done just over 20 years, and they're well due for replacement. So that's happening in October, and we are looking at the potential for a water storage tank in that area to enable much easier watering of the shrubs and plants in there by both the Friends group and the grounds team. That was something that David, I know, spoken to me about quite some time ago. So we're just looking at that. That incidentally is one of the items when we're talking about costs. So the tank that we were looking at, similar to the one that we've got on the Oakwood Centre, the cost for the same kind of thing. It's almost doubled. So the cost of some of those things have definitely gone up. So those are the kind of things that we're facing and having to do.
Have we got an opportunity to be grey water collection when eventually it rains?
Yeah, so we've there it's slightly more difficult. We don't have a structure particularly to harvest that. We're doing it on this building, and we're collecting from the grounds yard, and we have got a plan for which I'll mention, which was for a new irrigation system, the Bowls Club, which will also be able to use that structure there, which means we can harvest around just through the winter months for use through that.
Yes.
Kevin, just off the top of my head, so you're talking about the cost of this tank. How much are we talking?
I think it was about 350 quid, and it's now kind of 700.
Oh, okay. Because I was going to suggest a borehole, but they're about 7 grand.
Yeah. It wasn't massive, mate. It's just an example. Nothing's going down in price for us at the moment. Green Flag Award. I wanted to include something for this meeting, which I've not done before. I've always mentioned the Green Flag and talk about it, but I've never really provided some of the feedback information we've had. And I thought it might be interesting for members to see what the progress was. I think probably the most useful chart there is on page 14. Which just shows year one in 2017 of where the scoring was. The desk assessment is basically the application form, which is a folder. It's the management plan for the park, and the field assessment is what they see when they come out and walk around and talk to staff and poke around in the yard and see how it actually works. So I just included that to show that kind of steady progression that we've got, and the trajectory we've had from when we started, when we didn't get the Green Flag, and we worked on the feedback that we got through that process each year to make things better, and that's gone really well for us. We had terrific feedback this year. Love Parks initiative, we took part in, albeit in a fairly limited way this year. We did include press releases and information on each of our open spaces through the week, so a little feature on each one each week. We think that's something we'll be able to do more of. It's an annual thing. We can do more of that next year, so we're looking at how we might do that. The Bowls Green,
Yes, of course.
Covers the last two. Quite often, or all the way through this agenda, there's, excuse me, a reference to Friends of Woodford Park. And I just think we should record in the minutes our thanks to them, because it would, to me, it sounds as a lot of things that wouldn't happen if it wasn't for this team of dedicated people. And I think if the committee agrees that we should record our thanks and note that contribution.
Yeah, I'd certainly second that.
So that's certainly a key element in the green flag criteria, and it's definitely some of the things we would just never be able to do the council without even possible 10 staff or something. But yeah, absolutely. The Bowls Green, the green itself has suffered this year. Obviously, it's been one of the driest years we've had, and we've been operating for a couple of years without the old irrigation system, which was creaky to say the least, and it then stopped working. We have a plan for that, which is I will be submitting a report to Strategy and Resources for some funding for a bespoke irrigation system to replace the one that's there, which will enable us to water at sensible times of the day, be automated, so you can set it to go on at 4 o'clock in the morning, whatever time you need it to go on before the warm weather kicks in, to maintain that. And we are also due to be meeting with somebody from I can't remember the name of the association, the Bowls Association, in relation to the grass surface and how we can improve that and get it back as quickly as we can and get it back up to a better standard.
I was in a meeting with them today. They can learn. We obviously said that what you were doing, but they said they've lost quite a lot of money because they've lost fixtures because people haven't used. They didn't want to come to the Bowls because it wasn't good enough green. So I just thought I want to be flagged up to you.
Yeah, they have talked to us about it. So obviously, we're aware of that situation and agreed. We'll talk to them about it and work through it with them, so we're going to get it as back to how it was.
Yeah, the annual town council and bowling club match this year, which was very good as usual. And please, anybody who didn't come along, come to the next one. But I'm afraid my bowling did suffer, so I'm with the grass. So I'm really pleased to see that's being fixed. I could only, but then I won't have anything to blame.
That's what I was blaming too.
But it's a really good evening.
Yes.
Come this year, come next year, because A, it's enjoyable, and B, you can see, test the facilities yourself.
It was good fun. It was really good fun evening.
It always is.
Yeah.
It's really good.
Okay, thank you. Tree survey that we had done a few months ago, which flagged up a number of priority works which were funded to be carried out within the 3-month period. They're all underway and scheduled for the coming weeks, and then we'll look at the remainder of the works that were recommended in there over the course of the rest of the year and going into next year. Chapel Hall, we've got some works happening in there, replacing the ceiling tiles decorated throughout and changing the lighting to LED. That's what's happening in October. Malone Park, we're looking at a couple of things there, costings and things, which I'm hoping to take something to Strategy and Resources, which was to do with access and some pathways to the play area itself, and then you still have to trek through the grass. It's something we did talk about some time ago, that we had cost of that as a project.
Absolutely.
Yeah, is that because in winter particularly the turf gets pretty soft, doesn't it? And
it does, and it's quite a long walk through the grass to get there.
Yeah, okay. Any thoughts? I mean, at the moment we got those kind of little bridges on each side to stop people using it. How are we going to deal with that?
We're looking at a timber bollard solution that doesn't look unattractive, so you don't want something that looks awful, but actually spaced timber bollards that would stop people access with a gate areas.
Okay.
Allotments, waiting list is around 64 prospective tenants at the moment. We had another really, really useful meeting with the tenants committee week before last. Those meetings are continuing and really good. The committee is really engaging, very realistic about expectations of what we can achieve on the site, and that's working really well. They've got a good relationship as well with our amenities manager about things that might need doing at the site, and that's just working really well. I'm very pleased with that. The next item there is to ask the committee to
just on the allotments, I'm going to ask my normal question. Have we achieved every area of that site for allotment?
No, that was one of the things that we discussed as well, to look at which areas we can bring into use. Colin, our meeting manager, is meeting on site with a couple of the committee there to look at some of those specific areas and see which ones we can. There are some areas we're still having some issues with in terms of drainage and things like that as you go in the gate, but there are other areas that we could turn into plots.
I haven't been over there for years, but I remember over the far side of Bournemouth, there was an awful lot of brambles previously. Now, 64 prospective tenants, that's 64 loss of income.
Yeah.
So could it be pursued that we actually, get a big tractor in there with a plough on and rip out some plots?
Yeah, we're doing that with some of them. We've got a number of areas that we've identified we can do that. Where the brambles are along that boundary, they were planted deliberately to deter people from coming in, and that's worked really well.
You used to be able to get in from Town Lane, donkeys years ago.
You can still gate end, yeah. So there's still a gate at the top end, but down the bottom, people were able to pretty much walk through the fence,
right.
Which was always an issue. So that's why that was planted up. So there's a good kind of thickness of unpleasantness if you wanted to get in. One of the other things that we discussed and is happening, which addresses a couple of things. One in terms of the waiting list, but also in terms of people being able to manage plots going forwards, is that as plots become available, they're now letting them as 5-hole plots or smaller, not 10, because actually they're massive. And
I'm not letting people have 3 plots anymore.
No, there are very few. We've got more than one. So that's another thing. It's encouraging more people to take them on in a manageable way, give them an opportunity to actually get it up to scratch and meet the terms of the agreement without failing at the first hurdle. So that's been another thing that seems to be working quite well. So the other second paragraph there is in relation to request for the committee to appoint a small task and finish working party to consider an appeal from an allotment tenant who had lodged a complaint to which I've responded and provided a proposed solution and response to. Under the current terms of the tenancy agreement, it does allow for a tenant to request or appeal to the council in the event that they're not happy with the response from the clerk. In this case, from myself in the clerk's stead. Terms of reference, or a proposed terms of reference for that task and finish working party included there, Appendix B. It's a single item, so it is very much a task and finish party to consider that item, make a determination. And
Kevin, it's not as a cop out, but I actually know this person very well.
Yeah.
So I'm sort of withdrawing any comment from that or being in that party. Okay.
So if sorry, Councillor Gill.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, it sounds to me as if I am an allotment tenant, that the tenancy agreement isn't as precise as it might be, and there are a few loopholes, and this to me is one of them. It could be better worded. It to me makes sense for the task and finish working party not just to look at this complaint, but also to consider revamping the tenancy agreement, either at the same meeting or at a later meeting. But at least they will have heard what goes on or doesn't go on or whatever, and will be in a better position to make
That's a couple of years ago.
We did, if I could, just add, and that is the intention to do this year. So I think that's probably seems like a sensible suggestion. We did change it last year. We have changed it previous years. And we have got some other suggestions for changes this year through our meetings with the committee. So
Okay.
we are looking to review it this year, and that will come back to the next legislative service.
That sounds a good idea to me. Do we have to nominate people to this recognition task force here?
You need to vote 3 people onto it. I know from a previous conversation that Councillor Bragg was happy to be one of those 3. But
Am I able to propose?
yes,
I'd like to propose Councillor Bragg as part of the task finish group.
Can I just suggest we first approve the terms of reference with the change?
Let's do that then, yes.
To get the 3, and then we can do the numbers.
Does anybody have any questions about the terms of reference that are in the minutes here? Before we, Councillor Jewell.
Well, I think if you, I was just talking about the overall purpose here is to talk about in relation to an appeal, and I think it probably should be broader. So there is a B that allows the committee to consider other issues that needs some sort of, like the tenancy agreement amendments or whatever.
yeah, we could make it specific of that to review the current tenancy agreement and report that back to you.
Yeah, I'm happy with that amendment. Councillors, are we all happy with that proposal to amend them? Will I have a show of hands, please? Those against? Those abstaining? Those, that has been approved with that amendment. Right, Councillor Jewell.
Could I propose Alex Heath to go on to the working party?
Very happy to take his nomination. Anybody else I would like to, in that case, I propose myself as the third member of the task finish group.
Chairman, it doesn't, remember, it doesn't actually have to be a member of the Leisure Services Committee. So it could be any one of the 25 people. I could argue it would be helpful to have someone who isn't part of. I'm not volunteering because.
No, there was a suggestion.
Well, I think I've been involved with this individual as well, so. It would be
Yeah, there was a suggestion that another councillor might be interested in doing that, but I haven't heard a response back from that person as to whether she wanted to.
No, I'm not suggesting anyone, I'm just bringing to your attention that the pool for the volunteers is not just leisure services.
Do we have to decide on all 3 members tonight? Or we should.
The standing order suggests that the split of people is by the party split, so it'd be 2 Conservative appointments and 1 Liberal Democrat appointment, and because they're appointments, it really should just be able to be appointed, and we can note it at another meeting.
Right, does any other councillor have any other suggestions for nomination to the task finish group?
Could I just ask, because Carol has an allotment, so I'm sure her experience would be invaluable. Is it a conflict of interest that you can't put yourself forward?
I know there's no pecuniary interest, but I think there would be a conflict because I do know people.
Oh, you know the people consent, I see.
And Alex is happy, I guess, to.
But if we were, as we've changed terms of reference, but then going forward to looking at the allotment
I'd be happy.
tenancy agreement as a whole, it'd be a shame to lose your input.
Each member.
We can just note.
We can do all 3. In that case, I nominate myself as the 3rd Conservative member to stand on the task finish group. And if no other councillors have got any other nominations, I'd ask you to vote on that with a show of hands, please. All those against? All those abstaining?
Keep your nose clean.
Keep those clean. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. So last one, I quickly, just to note the town centre garden, the Stand Park Administrator, we're still waiting for Thames Water to actually do the connection, which is really frustrating. Probably put it in just in time for us to not need it at all. And
No, actually, how lovely it looks. I was really quite surprised, actually. I was in Woodley the other day and how nice it looks.
I saw a flower in it.
I know, so I'll have to call on flowers.
Flower.
I mean, it took its time coming, but I have to
It's
say.
a good possibility, they should be outlined, certainly ones.
yes, thank you, my God, lovely.
But it does, it obscures that lovely wall, so I'm very.
We do have the a number of allium bonds going in September to create some more colour.
Okay.
What about more said for people blind? We did talk about that.
Yeah, so we've replaced the plants at either end. I can't remember what they are, what they've been replaced with.
They did change the parties, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
And the last item there is to note Appendix C, which is a proposed planting scheme in relation to Gormless Park, which is something that has been worked on by Friends Group there, and we had a site meeting with Laura Buck from Woking Borough Council and the clerk from Early Town Council to look at what they were talking about in relation to our bit, which was really encouraging. It was new orchard, small fruit trees in partnership with Fruity Fruity, rejuvenating some of the orchard trees that will be there, and a planting scheme to some succession planting for some of the mature trees and some boundary planting. One of my concerns was what the initial maintenance would involve from this council, from the town council. We did get confirmation there that the Borough Council would carry out all of that, the watering and the maintenance in the first 2 years, which is actually established. So
Carol,
Yeah,
yes.
I'm a member of the Friends of Gormless and Open Space. I just wanted to assure the town council that at every opportunity, I tell the borough representatives that we haven't got any money and it's up to them to provide it for the next.
Very happy that you do that, Carol.
Making sure that we don't bear the cost. It's something for everybody.
Absolutely.
Yeah, sorry if this has been resolved, but I can't remember. Defibrillator, is that now up and running?
Or for the
Defibrillator was in.
yes, so there's one being installed at Woodford Park Leisure Centre in the box as part of the electrical works.
Right.
And the one we've got here sits in the office, but we're intending to install it on the outside of the building here. So we've had the electrician in to cost that for installing.
And the staff are trained.
Yeah.
Sorry, yes.
Sorry, I thought we were waiting till the end of your report, so I didn't speak earlier. I just wanted to ask about at the new play area. Whenever I've been there and talked to families, they said, could we have more picnic benches? So is that something we could look at?
Yeah, we've installed one, which the maintenance team rejuvenated, one of the old ones from up the top. So we've had one additional one going already. I found some really nice ones last week when I was on holiday, and I'll be talking to Colin about those because there's some really nice ones I think. You can go in a car.
How many are on site at the moment?
So there's only one on this side, I think, which is the larger picnic bench. We've installed another one where by the shelter, but there's room for some more.
Let's do it. Yes.
I mean, we spoke about the litter problem. Could we put another litter bin in there? Possibly one where the recycling is separate, so that people with water bottles, drinking cans, etc.
Yeah, that's part of a slightly bigger project for all the bins. But yeah, if we're putting benches in, then we need to put the bins in. The other thing I did skip over, sorry, and missed out was we were also looking at application for cycle racks and possibly a buggy park. Essentially, a lot of people actually we could do it just with like near fencing, but a space for people to park buggies and go into the play area rather than things being taken into the park.
I referenced water bottles, but I don't want to encourage single-use plastic. I'd rather that we could have an outside water point where people can refill their water bottles.
Yeah.
I would like the town council to look into that.
Yes, Councillor Hawkins is slightly beat you to that one. We've contacted me last week about that.
With a photograph.
Oh.
So yeah, we're looking at potential for something up at Woodford Park Leisure Centre, also possibly in the town centre, which might be a bit different.
I was hoping for something at the back
Yeah,
of
here.
the Oakwood Centre for the families using the play area. And also almost follows on from drinking more water. Could we have some signage in the play park, pointing parents to where the toilets are? Because I think most of us here are parents, and we know that, if to know where the closest ones, with the times that they're open.
Yes, we had a quote in for replacing all the signage. Well, that needs new signage anyway, but replacing all the signage through play areas and also on the sides of the building so that it's clearer where those things are.
Something actually in the play area would be great. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, you may.
Why we have a meeting?
Please, Carol, yes.
I think we're aware that when we showed the plans of the new play area, there was some concern from the parkrun organisers and participants. Has that restarted and how's it going?
What's proving to be the issue, we've got a site meeting actually that our amenities manager is arranging, is when there's another event. Because what they're doing at the moment is running through the this end of the skate park, which is much wider and provides a clear run through. That in itself has been working well. When there's an event on here that takes up all the space on the green, and it becomes more of a funnel through this end, that is more of a challenge. So what we're looking to do as those events come onto the field now is remark out where those boundaries are for fairgrounds and other events to come to, so that we can accommodate parkrun when those things are happening. That is much more challenging than it was before. I think the first parkrun after it went in was obviously the tester for how it would actually work. They just like absolutely sound. So we agreed to keep doing it the way they had been doing while the work was going on, which worked okay. As I said, it's the events. So that is one of the things we need to address. Yeah.
I see we've got, is it giant inflatables coming?
Yeah, yes, hence the site meeting this week to make sure.
It's great, but well done for getting, more events, more income, but also it's lots more fun for families.
Yeah, it's something we haven't had before, but yeah. Well,
Are you coming to the park on Saturday then, Alison?
I've always got a commitment Saturday mornings, you know that. Got my date with Keith.
Okay, are we finished with that agenda item?
One more question, thank you, Chair. A couple of informal requests to have the gates on the play area reversed, because what we're getting is people flinging the gates open, a cyclist coming round, or the kids running out. Is that coming formally, or?
We've had a couple of comments. Actually, Parkrun picked it up initially. I think I had one other comment. They've been installed the way that ROSPA recommend they should be installed, which is that they open outwards unless there's a significant hazard to prevent you doing that. So generally, if it's near a road or something like that, they should open inwards. So they were installed the right way around according to the ROSPA guidelines. That said, we're monitoring it to see how that actually works in practice. I haven't had any other comments since that initial thing, but we're seeing how that goes. So they've been installed the correct way around. We'll see how it.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, I recognise the bench.
Just very quickly on you mentioned garden remembrance and the plaques and what have you. I notice in the Rotary Garden there is a post with plaques, overfill or whatever, and no one's ever mentioned it. Could you say a little bit? Is that going to be an overflow area? Is that just temporary?
No, it did come to Leisure Services some time ago, but that was kind of when it was being discussed in principle, because it was Rotary that set that up as a specific thing. So we don't manage that, except we help with some of the maintenance in there, although they do most of that themselves as well. So it's a Rotary function, although it is available to members of the public, but Rotary managed that.
So Rotary put in the post and also screwed in all those plaques for deceased.
Yeah, and if it started as something that was available to Rotarians in that group, but they very quickly opened it up to members of the public if they wanted to do that, then they would just talk to Rotary and they could arrange for one of those small plastic installs.
So is there a plan for the town council to take it over? And then is there a plan to manage that Because I'm sure soon somebody will pick it up and say, oh, I don't want to go up in the Garden of Remembrance, I want to go here.
I mean, I don't think there's a conflict with it, particularly at the moment. I think they're different things to some extent. I don't know what the charge is for the Rotary charge for that. It goes in tandem with the planting of a rose in there in terms of donation, so it's slightly different. So we don't have a plan to sort of take it over, but we'll just let them manage that. I mean, it's been quite popular, and the area's been well maintained and looks really nice. But yeah, I don't think there's a conflict there.
Okay. I can move on to the next agenda item then, which is number 7, which is Community Youth Partnership Reports, starting on page 27. Gilda, would you like to, as you were vice chair and attended on the evening, is there anything of note that you wish to bring up? Before I take questions from anybody.
No, it's quite a positive meeting, except that obviously there was dissatisfaction in the length of time it's taken to actually go through the process of finding somebody to carry on the youth work. But that is in progress now. Jack, just around the corner, are actually continuing to do the work without pay. So they're doing quite a lot of work, but obviously it's not the same intensity as they usually do. But they are still doing a lot of youth work in Woodland for us, so that's good news. Apart from that, it's just a matter of going through the process of finding somebody to take over the youth work in Woodland.
Okay.
And that's what we are doing.
Do we have any sort of like notional timings on that?
No, we're looking at the people that are actually putting their name down for it, but nothing has been coming through this one. So,
Yeah, I'm just waiting on a couple of members for availability for some dates for meeting with the prospective.
Okay. All right, so it's moving forward then. That's what I'm.
Yes.
That's what I'm.
It's in. Yes.
That's what.
Okay, question. I was a bit concerned that you weren't able to appoint the chairman of this committee at the meeting.
Well, the fact is that Sam Milligan has been there at that committee for years. He hadn't turned up at the meeting, and Steve Alton there were very few people, but because we didn't have a chairman as a councillor, and Steve Alton didn't want to take it on. And we waited, but Sam didn't turn up until late, as you can see in the minutes. And so therefore it was agreed that he would actually chair for one meeting only, and that we would actually elect a chair.
Oh, right.
For the next meeting.
So just
Sam's willing to put himself on it.
Yes.
That's good news.
Yes.
Councillor John.
Thank you. I think the delay that we suffered with this is appalling. It's gone on and on. The can's been kicked down the road. Something should have happened before now. I was not just this year, it should have happened 3 or 4 years ago. We can't blame COVID anymore. I was going to ask the question you asked, Mr. Chairman, about the timeline, and I'm not at all surprised that we don't know. We haven't got a timeline. Yes, there will be this, there will be that, and we still haven't got anything firm. I really would implore that we actually take this one seriously, and that if once we do get the information that Kevin was talking about, then that this youth partnership does its work. And I'm not blaming the partnership because they don't call the shots. We have to obviously set up those meetings, but something needs to be done. The youth of Woodley deserve much better than this, just ignore them and this delay. And we really need to get something going.
I agree with that, Carol, but the fact is we haven't been able to get the people to actually
I think, yeah, I mean, that might be one of the factors, which is
Yes.
people trying to get people to bid for that contract.
Yes.
Sometimes can be quite difficult to get candidates. So yeah, it's a bit
That
like
has been the
posting for a
problem.
job, isn't it?
Yes.
It's like trying to get candidates for it. So I don't- but I do appreciate both your concerns over the timing. I think it's dragging on. We should really expedite the process now as much as we can do in a variable way. So
Yes, well, Kevin will say how
it's all
difficult.
down to you on Kevin.
It has been difficult to get people to actually bid for
It
this.
has, we went through the process twice to engage with potential providers because we didn't get what we wanted the first time round, so
Yeah.
we've got better response than we had the first
Okay.
time, so.
That's
Thank you. I don't think we should rewrite history. The reason why the delays is not because people are available. It's because a couple of councillors decided, and in many respects quite rightly, that the process followed for probably the previous 20 odd years was not robust enough, wasn't open enough, and wasn't transparent enough. And that was what put the delays in sorting out things like what do we want the provider to provide. So yes, it would be great if we carried on the previous process, which both the Conservative administration and the Democrat administration did, which was in essence reappoint Jack time and time again. The top council, one in particular, highlighted this is not, bear in mind we're talking in excess of £30,000 for this service, but that's rather a lot of money and it can't be going through on the nod. Now, my question actually is, as I understand it, we've gone through the expression of interest. We had one response that wasn't considered to be strong enough, saying councillor complained. So we went through a second process, expression of interest request, and we've got another potential. But what we don't have, and what I see, is what is going to be in the tender document that we are going to ask these, whoever wins the tender, to provide, and the council can then measure against what they're achieving against what they should be providing. That's some form of measurement system, which wasn't in there in the past.
Can I just say there is a draft terms of that service level agreement, and the principle of meeting with the prospective providers before that was to inform some of that information that then goes out in the tender document, so the members have a good understanding from people who do the work. Not that it would steer it, but it would provide information that might be helpful for us in finalising the terms of that agreement. So yeah, that's
And presumably that means the tender document will eventually go to SNR. That means the result, the recommendation.
oh yes, yeah.
And will SNR see that tender document? Or in fact, will the whole council, all councillors see that?
Yes, yeah, they would, and the terms of reference for that working group is to provide a recommendation to strategy and resources to make that decision. In terms of the timescale, what we look to do, depending on how that falls with meetings, rather than have it hold things up if there's not an SNR meeting, to do that, it might necessitate actually.
okay. Can I wind that up now? Thank you very much, Councillor.
When I go through these thoughts in my head, they sound quite good, but when I vocalise them, they might not sound so brilliant. Why are we contracting this out, inverted commas, to Jack, which is I believe, a Christian-based organisation, over which we have had limited control over the last years? I remember when Jack set themselves up, because I was in industry and we did some work with them. Now, why don't we bring this in-house and have our own council-employed, council-paid outreach worker, hours to match the amount of money we've got available, that could do all of these things? Because a lot of these are covered under working borough council in their social work that they do. So why doesn't the council bring it in-house, and then we could have accountability, management, and regular reports back on it?
Want to answer that?
I mean, we went through a significant process to develop a youth strategy, and that wasn't the outcome of that.
That's basically what it is. If you read back through the minutes, you'll see why we didn't go down that path.
But we haven't achieved anything in how many years? How long have we not been giving money to Jack?
3 years.
We've only had the new strategy. How long?
It was well over a year.
It's a year.
Yeah.
And they actually withdrew themselves, because I don't think there's resources to carry on.
But they're doing stuff now. And if you're 14, a year is a bloody long time.
But they are still doing work
They're not
with
doing that
the
stuff.
youngsters.
Yeah.
And the fact is, they've got so many volunteers that help with, if one person was doing it, they wouldn't be able to do the scope of all the things that we need them to
Right.
do. And Jack uses a lot of volunteers to actually do the outreach work. So they manage to reach a lot more youngsters than one person would be able to.
So how are we going to reach a conclusion, demonstrable conclusion that we can actually answer people when they say, well, we haven't done anything for a year? We haven't done anything for a year to come up with some.
Really good. It's a really good question. I think the only thing I would say to the public is that in these circumstances, we've gone through a more thorough exercise to come up with A, a strategy, but B, to come up with a good process for the selection of a new contractor for how long will this new contract be for?
It's 3 years initially with a potential extension to 3 years.
All right, so for up to another 5-year or 6-year contract, and this has taken longer than we'd expected. But we're on the path now, aren't we? I think we do need some timings. I think if we can start to pull that together over the next ahead of those services, so that everybody in here can understand how long it's going to take. Because it would be great if we could say to people, Woody, at the next Leisure Towns Council meeting, that we can appoint somebody in the next 3 months and they could start on the 1st of October. You see what I mean? I'd rather give people good news like that than just keep saying it's going to be another 2 months or we don't know how long it's going to take. So can we put some sort of like plan together for that?
I don't know who's on the working party, but I think it would have been helpful for someone from the working party to have attended this meeting, give us a report on their progress, and perhaps that's something that we can put on the agenda for the next meeting.
But we haven't had a meeting, have we?
Were the youth services working party reports the strategy and resources for the whole tendering exercise?
I understand that, but often there's cross-sectional working within councils, and I think it would be very useful for us to have better understanding.
Councillor Gilder is on it.
Oh, right, so did you meet before the end of July?
No.
It says due to meet before the end of July.
We didn't
Well,
we?
okay, well, could I suggest then, are there minutes that we would be able to,
They'll be going to the Strategy and Resources Committee, but I'll circulate them to
if they could come to us, I think that would be very informative.
All right, let's do that then.
Yes, we've got all new facts. I'm not just dreaming up.
Exactly, totally agree.
The right email.
Councillors, thank you very much. That's excellent discussion. All right, so I'll move on to the next item on the agenda, number 8, which is the Garden of Remembrance from page 30. Kelly.
Thank you, Chair. Some concerns were raised at the last meeting of the Leisure Services Committee regarding the removal of some plaques at the Garden of Remembrance, which were ones where the owners had been contacted and did not wish to renew and pay the renewal fee for a further 10-year period for that plaque to stay in situ. There's some background information there about the charge and how that actually works. I think what had happened, because we hadn't done that previously, so we hadn't actually contacted people in respect of renewals, those that the council had approved a renewals charge specifically for that historically. And obviously that came up at the last meeting, and members expressed some concern there about whether the plaque should be removed, whether there was more value in them staying there from perhaps a sort of social heritage point of view, and what the implications of managing that in a different way might be. So the purpose of this report was to basically explain what the situation is and what the potential impact of doing that might be. So there's some information there under the current situation about the number of plaques that were removed. We contacted everybody who had a plaque in there, except those that weren't contactable because we couldn't get a response. In terms of maintenance, there's not a lot of maintenance once those plaques are installed. They go in and we put them up. That's pretty much it. There's some cost in terms of installation, minimal cost of a sleeper and screws, literally, and some labour to put something up. But there's not much ongoing maintenance costs for plaques that are already in situ. Another potential consideration would be capacity. There's room in that area for a number of more sleepers that would last quite a lot of years. So there isn't a capacity issue in terms of the number of plaques that could go up. And there's some information here, it's not directly comparable, but there's some information there just for context in terms of what happens elsewhere, in terms of costs for something similar, so really crematorium, East Hampstead Park and Maze Lane in Earlham. I think what that shows is that although the renewal fee is good value, I would say, what we charge for that, and a number of residents did wish to renew, and we haven't had any comments or objections from people we contacted. I think the question there is about whether the council wants to take any down or prefer to leave them there. The options that I've put in here, which are free, which is to continue with a renewal fee, continue charging that and remove unrenewed plaques if people don't wish to do that. Secondly, to continue with the fee but leave unrenewed plaques in situ, which might seem a little unfair if you paid the fee and the person who has the present plaque is still there. Or to potentially not charge the renewal fee and leave plaques in situ indefinitely, which in terms of capacity probably would be an issue for a number of years. So we're 20 years in and we've probably got as long to go before we might need to think about putting it somewhere else. Any questions?
I would favour option 3. First of all, I don't think we should be comparing ourselves in any way with the sites that are crematoriums or cemeteries. There are garden remembrance. Well, I hope not. Not yet. There are no burials or anything else there. So this is a very different site. The first thing I considered was the cost of maintenance, but we're told that that's minimal. The initial cost of putting it in, and that would be covered by the charge for 10 years. Getting hold of people to get that renewal charge is obviously difficult because the spouse, the surviving spouse may have died as well. And I just think that it's the least we can do for people with garden remembrance. It's a very small service to offer. And I think that we should have no renewal fee. We should obviously refund the renewal fee to those who've already paid, unless they want to leave it as a donation for the upkeep, and then take it.
Question.
Okay.
Sorry. Sorry, come on. Get my wires crossed here.
I have a fourth idea actually. Why can we not actually put £50 onto the charge and then have no renewal? Just make it 200 instead of 150. And that way it would cover any extra costs, and it wouldn't, we wouldn't have to refund any money to anybody, because obviously the cost would be inherently, you'd have a 20-year or above time where people could have it.
And it would still be less than.
It would still be less than they're actually paying for anything else.
Okay, so we could charge a bit more and then leave them there
Leave them there
forever, and then maybe after 20 odd years, remove them, keep the
It
plants.
doesn't even matter, is it? You've got enough room.
Yeah,
They can
doesn't
stay
going
there.
to matter, isn't it?
That would remove, I mean, it must take a considerable staff time each year doing all the contacting and administrating it, and you wouldn't need to do that.
No,
We'd still need to reimburse those that.
well, you wouldn't have to
Paid the
reimburse,
renewal fee at
because
this
if you
point.
put the charge up, it would have been.
Yeah, but those that have already paid have already, and
Oh, yes, but I think, do you mean from henceforth?
From henceforth.
Yeah.
But those people that had already paid 10 years treated the same.
So they only paid the lower, the 100,
Yes.
the lower amount to have it in the first place.
Councillor, you had a, hand up.
Hayes read my mind. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Jim, am I understanding that we want to charge people more money for the plaques or something that costs us very little? So we are trying to make profit out of the Memorial Garden. Is that, am I misreading it? But that's how I understand it. That what we charge at the moment, ignoring any renewal, easily covers the maintenance or the installation of those plaques and the maintenance of, because there's no maintenance. And yet we're talking about asking them for more money. And I think we're looking at desperate times at the moment. We shouldn't be making people, asking people for more money, especially it's very difficult.
You are actually maintaining the garden as well, with the cost of those, aren't you?
But you do that for this, sorry, 3 years, Chair. You do that for the whole, Woodley as a whole.
Do you not think people outside Woodley who do pay slightly more will then rush to want to use our Memorial Garden? Because, you know, if it's free compared to Reading Crematorium, it's Hampstead Crematorium to Maze Lane.
If you put a plaque up at a crematorium, it's because your loved one was cremated there or buried there or whatever. It's not because you have a certain obligation or an amount. It's where they're interred. I think that's.
But my understanding is the charge contributes towards the upkeep of the garden and remnants. So by removing it, we just place a bigger burden on Woodley Town ratepayers. If we do take the charge away and make it free of charge. Having said that, I think the fee also encourages people to take responsibility for the plaque, and after 10 years, if they are not going to take responsibility, then it gives us the option to remove it quite legitimately. And I think it's more for that reason that we make the charge, that it will be maintained. It's not, because if we made it free and we just continue to put plaques there, even in 20 years' time, we'll have a problem. And we'll have to revisit that. This mechanism provides, as shall I say, a way of contributing to cost, which means the local ratepayers in a good situation, but also it means that where agreements do come to an end, we can remove them if they're not big. Can I
Just slightly helpful. If in terms of what the charge is, that wouldn't be something that necessarily would have to be decided this evening. The charges are agreed for everything in the normal way through leisure services, considering that, making a recommendation, then we go through the budgeting process. So I think it's probably, if tonight's meeting was able to agree the principle of it, then if there was an adjustment to the charge,
Can I make a suggestion? Because you used the word profit, you actually set out, if you go down this route, whatever the extra is, you actually set up an earmark reserve specifically for the garden and the maintenance, so that it's ring fenced, because there is maintenance. And we've heard tonight that the sleepers are all going to be replaced. Well, that could be offset if you had that ring fencing. You could actually revamp all the planting, make it upgrade the planting or whatever. If you had extra money available, but it was only dedicated. It's not profit. It's dedicated to the.
I don't think anyone's talking about making profit in the garden for remembrance. I think we're just making a contribution to the I know, but that's her opinion. Can I recognise the member of the public, please?
Yeah, I speak the Friends of Woodley Park on behalf of residents, basically. In the last 3 months since the fact have gone, I've had a tremendous amount of feedback. Most annoyed that plaques have been removed. They're not relatives who read half the plaques, they're people who reside in Woodley and their friends that they like to read and see on the plaques, etc. And now those names are no longer there. It's a garden remembrance. You can't compare it to the cost of these other places, which are crematoriums and burial grounds. It's not like that. It's just purely a place where people like to go and see the plaques.
Okay.
The upkeep of it, I'm sorry I'm going to say this, but it's pretty dismal at the moment. We, Brentwood Park, maintained it for a while. And coming back from it, the park now, but there were quite a bit of problems with it and we stopped doing it. We will be prepared, and I will even recruit more people to maintain it. It's a community garden. We have more interest in it than the staff because we understand the purpose of it. Let the community run the garden, let us maintain it. It won't cost the council a penny.
We discussed this, we mentioned this at a council meeting previously. Can we agree that we put back all those plaques that have been removed? We draw a line and from a set date when it's been agreed by whichever committee's agreed which way we're going forward with longevity and charges. But I think we should not use the word forever, because forever is a long time. You actually bury someone in a churchyard for 150 years and then that's it. Perhaps we need to have some formal procedure in place.
Need some sort of procedure, I agree with that. Councillor Hamilton, what would you like to say?
I was just going to say, if you refer back to agenda item 1 on page 3 and 4, you can see that the Garden of Remembrance expenditure is, 7431, and the income is 1150. So, the income has goes nowhere near the expenditure that's put towards that garden.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Sorry to come back again, but I'd just like to clarify for those people that may not realise the purpose of Garden Remembrance. I was on Woodley Town Council all those years ago when they decided to have one, and that was installed. And it was a place for people to contemplate and to remember. It wasn't a remembrance plaque garden, it was a remembrance garden. And I think it's something that David's saying, that I go there and there's plaques up there. And you go there to think about them and just a bit of quiet solitude, if you like. It isn't just about those plaques. And because of that, it should be something borne by everybody. And so, it should be on there for people to pay for. And it shouldn't be the plaque owners who are trying to fund maintenance, etc. And I think it would be brilliant if we could take up David's offer of it being looked after by the community for the community. I think the whole business of charging does actually make it a very different kettle of fish.
Could I say, as you think on the next agenda, we discuss improving security of the Garden of Remembrance, because I know that is of concern to people.
Yeah, I mean, that has been discussed, but unfortunately it is an open park. And there's not.
Whether we could have a gate that was on a timer, so it locked.
But then you're locking people in there.
Well, you get locked into.
I think to be honest with you, to lock someone in at 9, 10 o'clock at night is unreasonable. And I think people get in and out of that Garden of Remembrance, whatever. If they're determined, they'll get in there.
Why don't we treat it? I think we should look at it. I think it's quite important. As Carol said, people value it as a quiet place to go and sit. And it's not a place for young people to go and sit and drink and do other things that we certainly don't want them to be doing in our Garden of Remembrance.
Okay, so we have 3 options at the moment. Do we wish to take a vote on these, or do we wish to add another option, or do we wish to roll it over to the next level services meeting? So I've got a couple of things there. So I want to start with is a proposal that is there any proposal from any councillor to add another option to the list that's already in front of us? Okay, so it is just these 3 options that we want to consider as a leisure services council. What we'll do, we take each one in turn. So I'll take the first option here, which is to continue charging a renewal fee and removing unrenewed plaques, as we currently do in the current process. I have a show of hands to see who would be happy to continue with that practice. All those against? All those who wish to abstain? Number two, continue charging the renewal fee, but leave unrenewed flats in situ. This would likely to be considered unfair to those who have paid for the renewal. Have a show of hands who's in favour of that option. Those against? Those abstaining?
That's been carried.
I think that's been carried. Then we'll go with option two, which is to continue charging the renewal fee, but leave those unrenewed flats in situ. Yes, councillor Austin.
I do think we should put a time limit on that though. Be it 100 years.
Proposal would you like to make?
Thanks. 75 years. I propose that the plaques go, once they're put up, they stay for 75 years.
I would like to second that proposal. Who else would like to set, can I have a show of hands who's in favour of that, adding that as a proposal to the option we've just considered? All those against? All those abstaining? That has been noted and approved.
None of us will be here.
You won't be, but I think it's just a sensible thing, so.
Yeah, Chair, could I just express my concern by taking those options 1, 2 and 3? I think we have probably got a different outcome to what we might have done, and it would have been better if you'd asked for a proposal for an option and then voted on that rather than going through each one.
I did ask for to any councillor to make a proposal in addition to the 3 that want people, and no councillor came forward for that, which is why I went through
Well,
every
that's
single one.
because you said in addition.
But you did have the option and nobody said anything, so I had to then go through the agenda as it is, as an
Wasn't in
option.
addition.
But
I
there
would have
were,
proposed number 3. So we've got past that. Could I now make another proposal that we consider the offer or the possibility of the Friends of Woodford Park taking on the sum for all of maintenance upkeep? I don't think it should be decided tonight, but I think we should be considering that with a report to come back to the next meeting.
add that to the next agenda. Let's
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that necessarily has to be a decision of the committee we to do. I'm perfectly happy to talk to David about how we might do that.
Why don't we do that then? Why don't we get the town, deputy town clerk, to the Friends of the Remembrance, and to see if we can come up with a proposal that everyone's happy with. Yeah. So the next agenda item, which is item 9, which is future agenda items. Have we got any that anybody would like to propose? Councillor Heath.
Yeah, all the time I've been here, we've never discussed it. I understand we are responsible for this, and that's seats around Woodley.
Seats.
Yes, seats. There are a lot of seats around Woodley. We don't provide all of them, but this committee does have budget for providing seats. As I say, we've never discussed this since I've been on the council, and I think we should.
Neither me too. I've discussed seats.
Is that the amenities budget you're referring to? At the item described as amenities.
Future agenda items, yeah, so we.
Sorry, you referred to the town council having budget for seats.
Yeah.
Are you referring to the amenities within expenditure?
My understanding is we've got some budget for seats.
There is some specific budget also on the capital programme, which is specifically for seats.
Yeah. As I say, we've never discussed this at all since I've been on the council, and I think it's been an idea just once to consider them and the usefulness to particularly old people.
Can I just ask what information you'd like to see in the context of a
well, you know, we could consider whether we should actually be putting seats. I know in response to people giving us money, I understand that we do that, but I've never actually seen any details. But consider the possibility of installing seats. My own view is I have a long time ago supplied a map to you of all the seats in Woodley. My view is that if we do put any more in, that we should think about this scientifically and actually put them in the gaps. Possibly thinking in terms of where old people might be, where the old people's homes are and the bungalows are in Woodley, but actually to fill in the gaps. But what made me think about this was my mum, who went down to the shops and she didn't go the straightest way. She went through the park. When I asked her why, it's because she went through the park, she could sit down. And that was the difference between her getting into the shops and not. So my thinking is that in Woodley, if we we might not think we're going to put any seats in, but if we do, or we get money given to us to put a seat in, to actually think about it, not just plonk it another one where we've got them already, but actually think about where they might go to fill in these gaps.
I can provide something that shows what we've got, how many, where they are.
Yes, I think there's one or two more since I did that map, so I might update it.
That's a great idea. That's a heap. And I think, providing encouragement by providing seats to get people out and walking, all abilities, it's a great idea. And let's keep talking about it. Let's put it on the list anyway. Thank you very much. Councillor.
I can tell you that the people that sit on the walls in Woodlands Avenue, because there are no seating.
Maybe we should put a seat there then.
Woodlands Avenue, because they've got it in Beechwood Avenue.
Yeah.
They go down. And nothing in Fairwater Drive or any of the near parts of course.
I'd be interested to know who owns them.
There are seats in Fairwater Drive at the bus stops, but they are seats.
Yeah.
Well, yes.
Yeah, they are.
And it was this.
They're all on the map.
Yeah. And the bus stops with seats. That was me.
But there's nothing in Beechwood.
Councillor George.
Yeah, another agenda item. Could we have an update on the youth strategy progress, please?
On the
youth strategy progress. We need to know, we need to keep this on the agenda.
Okay, so I think the strategy's been decided. So what we want is an update on the tender process for youth provision. Yes, we'll put that on the next agenda. So, yes, Councillor.
Could I have an update, please, on the plaque for the London Bridge disaster? I mentioned a couple of meetings ago.
Yes, you may, yes. In fact,
There'll be a renewal charge.
if you don't put it on the agenda, then maybe the town council date outside this meeting.
Thank you.
Councillor.
Should we have an update on London Mead, please?
I haven't heard much about it for quite some time, actually.
London Mead.
London Mead, which is the small play area under the bridge there, which open space. I'll talk about play more. Right. Can I take the next agenda item, which is the last one, which is publicity website? Does anybody have anything that they'd like to consider to publicise on the website?
There's a new bounce and play area that's going to be very good.
I think that's an excellent one.
Well, it's like a fun fair.
Well, fun fair, yeah.
That's the job.
Yeah, we should publicise our newfound decision on the plaques and remind people that there is a renewal fee as they buy a plaque.
Yeah.
I don't think it's fair to people to do that and not know that there's an ongoing cost.
I think that's fine. We can, what have we currently got? We can. In that case, councillors, I think we've covered everything on the agenda, and if there's nothing else, I will close the meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Darren, for standing it.
Thank you for your understanding and participation.